Did some catching up recently after taking some time, a little bit of time to do other stuff. Just catching up on some favorite YouTube um, channels. Saw the interesting conversation between the Captain Lee on um, Anderton's channel with Rick Beato. I don't watch too many of those videos these days, but every once in a while I'll check in and see what's going on. Interesting that there was a lot of conversation in that video about both their children, who I take to be older children, maybe teenagers, maybe even young adults. Them both being a little bit worried about their children not taking to music as they thought they might at a younger age. And I think this is probably a worry or a concern or an anxiety that a lot of older musicians have. And I remember back when my two children first came along, it took a while. I mean, I put them in music lessons. And my daughter took to it right away and became a very proficient piano player, very disciplined. Good sight reader, but not really creative, not a composer, not a songwriter, just somebody who can interpret other people's music really, really well. But then, in later years when when left high school, and the rigors of those particular teachers she was with kind of let it lapse, and lost some of that head of steam that she had. My son was a completely different story. He was more of a late bloomer. Tried to get him into music lessons, didn't particularly do well, didn't really like the traditional way of learning music, didn't really take to piano lessons, and even my first attempts to show him guitar stuff were relatively unsuccessful. And then later in life, probably around 13, 14, developed his own interest in music and picked up my guitars and taught himself to play, and now is pretty proficient. Two completely different paths. And I've been also very lucky because both of my children, particularly my son, my children are both adults now, but they are very different from people their age. A lot of millennials and Gen Z youngsters who see music as sort of a free commodity, and just, whatever's going is what they consume. No particular heated passion for any of it. Just, loosely follow what's popular, and music is functional. It's something to have on in the background or dance to. My daughter, took an interest in certain types of music, and my son has become an absolute audiophile, like his dad, like me, collecting his own CDs and records, and listens to a massive, wide, diverse styles of music. So I feel very fortunate in a way, because when I'm listening to people my age talking about how music just is not as meaningful for their progeny as it is for themselves, I feel fortunate that I'm not in that boat. I'm not in that camp, really, because at least one of mine is every bit as passionate and as much of an audiophile and a collector as I am, and even introduces me to music that I'm not aware of, particularly in genres like punk rock, and even some of the metal genres as well. So I feel very lucky, but as well, I have worked as an educator, as a teacher in the in the secondary education fields for about 16 years, while doing my lutherie stuff as well. Always kept my hand in as a part-time college instructor, and had thousands of young students go through my tutelage. Funnily enough, not in music, but in English literature, mythology, writing, things like that, which is another world that I'm involved with. And I've noted, some of them have a very sort of passive, almost disinterested relationship to the music world or music in general. Of course, you can't apply that as a sweeping epithet, because I meet lots of young people who love music and are passionate about music. So I can't say, oh, the kids today, they just don't like music like we used to, because it's not quite true. There are some that do. However, there's a lot that they kind of miss out on the experiences that we had, following the music trends, buying the new records, having listening parties, or listening to them ourselves, spreading out the gatefold, or later maybe reading the liner notes on a CD. All of that's sort of not part of, none of it is a rite of passage for them. It's something that's completely skipped. But then there again, I don't want to stereotype people, because I know people that stream who process music digitally through Spotify or other means, that are passionate about music. They just don't buy physical media. They find it easier to study music in its sort of digital streamed form. And who am I to judge that? And they do listen to albums, and maybe even download albums and pay for the music, which hopefully the artists get some of. But there again, I'd say that's a very small majority. Most don't. Even, it seems like yesterday we were all building, massive iTunes libraries, right? Music was still something you owned, you personalized, because you had these libraries and you would download songs or albums. Even that's old hat now, and music is completely disassociated from something that you possess. It's a commodity that you can dial into temporarily. It's just like any other website, really, that you use for the duration that you're using it, and then you basically click it off. It's a whole different world musically, and it's funny to hear older people, sort of in my age group, and the two that I'm thinking of, one is younger than me and one is older. I'm sort of in between them. It's easy to fall into that idea, that things were better back then, and kids today are missing out. But music appeals to one of our most basic senses, and I think that it will continue to thrive and appeal, just in different ways, different formats, than what we grew up with. I'm even hearing, now some, pushback on things like the vinyl revival. I watched a couple of videos. I can't remember the name of the vloggers, but I watched a couple of videos by older people saying, the vinyl revival is rubbish and we shouldn't go back to that. Who wants to listen to clicks and pops? Digital music's where it's at, so we should embrace it. So, it's hard to generalize people. There are trends. There are you can say that, a majority of people do this or that, but within any particular demographic, you get people that sort of buck the system, buck the trends. So, there's enough people seeking out music in whatever format, getting passionate about music, collecting music, whether it's in old formats or new formats. But it's just interesting, to hear people's anxiety about how the next generation is going to respond or process or react to or even learn music. It's long gone from the required curriculum at most schools and colleges, isn't it? That old intro to music class is no longer required. So you can get a secondary education, not really, have any deep historical knowledge about any kind of music, which I tend to think is kind of sad, something that we've lost, but other people will disagree with, that we've made room for other forms of learning, another subject matter that's more practical or more important. But I remember the anxiety around how I would pass on my love and passion for music, how I would facilitate, my children or the next generation reception of music. I always had it available in the house. I always had lots of instruments. I always had lots of, let's say, choices available to not only my own children, but their friends that came around, or other relatives and friends. I can't think of a younger relative in my wider family on either side, either mine or my wife's, where there was a kid that didn't get an instrument from me. I just can't think of any. Whether it's a ukulele, a violin, or a guitar. I think along the way I have sent or given, or occasionally, if it's a distant relative, they've sought me out and bought one from me at a very discounted price, I might add. So I feel like I've done my bit, but I remember that feeling of obligation to people coming through the next generation, to have it available, to have it readily consumable for them. Of course, you shouldn't make it too easy. Seeking things out is always part of the journey. I mostly had stringed instruments around the house, but my son ended up, his primary instrument was the drums. So a lot of times they'll find their own way, and it won't be something that you anticipate or envision for them. So you have to sort of remain open to how different they might be, or their passions might take them completely in a different area, something that you're not familiar with that you need to learn about. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting because it seemed to come up in that conversation, and I've seen it mentioned by quite a few channels, particularly with guys around my age, maybe a bit younger, a bit older. So it seems to be that we have a collective fear of music becoming diluted, or not as important, or culturally overlooked, or devalued. It's something that I've commented on this channel before, maybe with a different approach. I've never actually talked about my children and how I approached it. So hopefully it's a new angle to think about. But I'd be interested to hear what people their own experiences are in the comments. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you're around young people, what are your feelings about the next generation, or how music is approached by a rapidly digitizing world? Do you have anxieties? Do you think music is in good hands? Are you one of these people that just always thinks it was better in our day, like a lot of us tend to do? Or do you have a particular hope and enthusiasm for the future and all the benefits that progress will bring? Let me know. I'm always interested. Again, I read all the comments that get to me, and I try to reply them all. So bear that in mind as you respond, that you're not just sort of shooting something out into thin air, that somebody will read it, and hopefully YouTube won't block it so I can respond to it. All right, folks, I've waffled on for nigh 15 minutes. Interesting topic. We haven't done a topical video in a while, so they don't get as many hits, but I really like to include them on here because I really like to hear what people have to say. So anyway, folks, see you on the next video, and yeah, stay well.